In this video, we're going to talk about spreadsheet standards of professionalism. These guidelines are here to help you create best-in-class spreadsheets that have excellent visual appeal. We won't go through the detailed mechanics of Excel, but today we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of design and how we can make our work look and feel as professional as possible. In addition to making sure that our functions work properly and that our references are anchored appropriately, whether it be an absolute or a relative reference, part of creating excellent work in spreadsheets has to do with how it looks and feels. How the end user is going to perceive your work in large part comes not just from whether the functions work properly, but from whether it looks and feels like a professionally designed file. While these tips and tricks are not an exhaustive view of everything that can possibly be done to make your work professional, it's a starting point from which we'll build. You should start by watching these videos about the basics of design. Each of these is a hyperlink and will take you to a video online. After you've done that, there are a few things that we'll go through, and I'll look at this sheet with you first, and then we'll talk through in a spreadsheet how these principles apply. The first thing to note is project directions. Usually, the projects that you get are teed up as if they're a request from a manager at work. Before you turn in your project, I highly recommend that you go through and double check every single item on the list that is asked for. That's the best way to make sure that not only do you get a good grade, but that you get in the habit of returning work as it's expected to your management team. The first impressions on a spreadsheet are very important. In fact, the example spreadsheet that we're looking at, I'll flip over to it, looks like this. I'm not sure what your first impression is when you look at it, but I'm not sure where to look. I don't know what it's telling me, and I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do with it. When you turn in your spreadsheets, make sure that everything is scrolled up to the top all the way to the left, that it has an appropriate level of zoom in or zoom out so that whoever's opening that file starts exactly where you want them to. Next is about hard coding numbers. We create a lot of formulas and functions in Excel, and you can type in the numbers directly into a function, but to follow these standards of professionalism, we should always reference another range. So that means referencing input cells or output cells with formulas in them in order for our functions to work properly. That way, there's no surprises on how something is calculated because we show the user exactly where that's being done. Same thing with color schemes and fonts. We should avoid overly loud colors or a bunch of different fonts and colors all in the same spreadsheet. We want our work to be clean and professional, and so typically we have a maximum of 2 different fonts. The fonts should be clear and easy to read and should be professional looking. So as an example, we would avoid something like Comic Sans. Workspace utilization refers to how we have the spreadsheet laid out. We want just the right amount of white space so that what we're showing pops or stands out favorably without being overly intrusive on the visual space. When we talk about cell alignment, text is usually aligned to the left and numbers are right aligned. The reason for that is that we want the units on each of these numbers to line up with each other so that when I compare, I can do that easily. Even with these percentages, where they're right aligned, you'll see that the negatives, represented in red with parentheses, their units still line up here with the positive numbers. Lines on dashboards should generally be hidden unless they're absolutely necessary. We use the grid lines on data sheets so that we can read through large sets of data, but on a dashboard it's less needed. We should always designate cells that are input or output cells. Especially the input cells should have a different format from everything else, and they should be noted somewhere that that is an input cell so that the user knows how to use it. Our calculations that are not needed for presentation can be moved to other worksheets. We should never just color the text in the cells white to give the appearance of being hidden. This gives us an opportunity where users might accidentally break our work. We want to avoid scrolling as much as possible, but if we need to have scrolling on a dashboard, please make it so that the user will scroll down first and avoid horizontal scrolling. We should always double check for typos and errors. Make sure you use spell check, although please note spell check does not work on the sheet names in Excel, so you'll have to check those on your own. Our number formats should be consistent. Dollars for dollars, decimal points should be the same number of decimal places out, and percents. Indicators for negative numbers, for example, would be either a parentheses in red or a minus sign in front of the number. Whatever we choose, it should be consistent. talking about aligning text in cells, we should try to avoid using the merge cells because that can mess up formulas and formatting. Instead, try to use center across selection. We talk about this in another one of our videos. It's not always needed, but it's good to consider whether or not your work will be printed out. For example, someone might want to export a dashboard to a PDF so that they can email it more easily. You should, in that case, make sure that the page is set up properly to fit on the right amount of space and that it has a footer to show when the date and time was that it was printed. Finally, as we talk about charts and visualizations, one of the greatest benefits of Excel is being able to visualize and explore data quickly. One of the biggest challenges of Excel is figuring out which is the right visualization to use to view your data. And there are several projects that we'll work on that ask you to solve that exact question. You have some resources here that help you to see which chart or graph would be useful, and it gives you some visual analysis information in terms of what the science is behind why people perceive things the way that they do. In brief, though, we should always label our titles and axes of the chart, and they should be clear to the user. Here's one example where we have this chart here that was very messy, hard to read the numbers, the dates are slanted, the title here is above, I'm not sure what that means. After we do a little bit of touch-up, we clarify the title first, time to close the deal, and then we call out that indirect sales missed their goal 3 times, 1, 2, and 3. I can quickly see here that this is how many days are needed to close, and I've formatted the axis across the bottom to show the months and the year in a way that's easily read. There are a lot of books that go through this. One of those is available to you for free on the BYU Idaho Library online. Here's a link for it here. Now that we've gone through these standards on this PDF, let's flip over to our Excel file and let's go through and we'll work together on how we might make this more professional. As an example for you to consider, here is what a potential finished product might look like.